The national parks hold more secrets than the deepest ocean. They're vast, untamed wildernesses, and sometimes they don't give back what they take. As a park ranger, I've seen things that would make the hair on your arm stand up, and heard whispers that would chill you to the bone. We do what we can to bring those secrets back to the surface, for the families, for justice, for peace of mind. But sometimes, when the wilderness gives us a glimpse of what it's truly hiding, some of us don't live to tell the tale. We've been hiking these trails since I was young, growing up in the shadow of these mountains and exploring their ancient silent woods, with my brother pushing each other to climb as high as we could. There are hollows beneath these peaks, chasms so deep you couldn't see the sky after a certain point, and in those hollows are currents of dread that will take you and never let you go. This isn't to scare anyone off from visiting, but be careful while you're there, enjoying nature's bounty. Otherwise, I might get a call about you one day. I ended up joining the park service in college, as well as the search and rescue team. And after college, I decided I wanted to learn more. I learned as much as I could about wilderness survival and tracking. I became a volunteer for the local sheriff's department before finally joining their specialized wilderness search and recovery unit. The WSRU operates all over the state, but most of my calls are for people who had been lost in the national park region. It's a lot of wilderness, and it's easy to get in over your head, so to speak. I've seen a lot in my 5 years on the team, but I've been okay so far, because someone was there to teach me the rules. My first day on the team, I met with my partner, Elias Thorne. Elias was a legend in his field. He'd been tracking in these mountains for decades, the go-to guy for everything from lost hikers to body recovery, and my supervisor said he had asked for me personally. "I've heard good things," he said, shaking my hand as I took a seat. "You were top of your class at the Ranger Academy, took the search and rescue team to nationals, and you've had nearly 500 registered searches. That's impressive for someone so young." I was pleased, but when he got serious, I knew he wasn't just praising me. Working with the WSRU is a little different from what you're used to. Volunteer rangers play by their own rules, but here we have set protocols that we follow when we track. They may seem silly, but they're the sorts of things that could save your life. So listen close. Some of them were simple enough, and were things I already did when I tracked. Check your gear before you head out. Always put out your safety markers. Track in pairs whenever you're on WSRU business. Don't do long treks into hollows you don't know. These were simple rules that most rangers followed, but Elias had some that made less sense when I started out. They were rules that made more sense the longer I worked with him, like the rule about the swirling mist. If you see mist gathering in the valleys, that's fine, but if you see it moving in a circle, pack your gear and leave the area. That one seemed strange at first. I had never actually seen mist swirling in a circle. The first time we encountered it, I was half on the trail when he grabbed me by the shoulder. He was an older guy, like I said, but his strong grip left no room for argument as he walked me back off the path. "Pack it in," he said, taking off his hat and walking back to the truck. "What? Why?" I asked, trudging awkwardly in my hiking boots. "This is the spot they think the hiker disappeared in." We were looking for a woman, about 30 years old. She'd gone missing further down. This part fed into a dense thicket, and this stretch of wilderness, in particular, had a lot of thorny bushes and hidden pits where a person could get caught. We were starting here because it seemed the best place to find her. The plan had been to work our way back up the ridge. Now it seemed my partner was giving up. I was curious to know why. "The mist," he said. "It's circling." He said it matter-of-factly, as if it were as obvious as the hat on my head. "And I said, needing a little more than that. He sighed and rolled his eyes. Rule 7. We don't track when the mist circles. As I took my gear off, I heard him call the head office and tell them that we had located the woman. He said the spot was good and the mist was circling. He also said we would give it another half an hour and then go retrieve what was left. I was as confused by what he was saying as I was by the situation. What was down there? And why couldn't we go get this woman? As he hung up the phone, he went to sit on the tailgate, tapping the spot beside him. Sorry, kid. I forgot you're new at this. We don't go tracking when the mist circles. It means there's something down there that could be dangerous for us. I looked at the swirl of gray. The path it took was almost hypnotic. I wondered what could be beneath the surface. What is it? I asked. No idea, Elias said. Not sure I really want to know, but sometimes it appears, and when it goes away, there are signs left behind that something was there. It took about 45 minutes for the mist to stop swirling and drift on down the valley. Once it was gone, we put on our gear and made our way to the spot. Elias had been eyeing it, and as we went down, we found what we were looking for. There was a skull and some bones left behind, but nothing much to identify with. They pulled the dental records after we brought them up. It was concluded that it was the woman we were looking for. As Elias called it in, I got a good look at the bones. They were something else entirely. The woman had barely gone missing an hour ago, but these bones were picked clean. It was like something out of a horror story. I wondered briefly if the national parks could support creatures that consumed flesh. I shook away the thought pretty quickly. The climate was too cold for most tropical predators, after all, but that led to more questions. What had done this? Where did the rest of the body go? If there were rules in place for it, then how often did it happen? Elias must have known. I needed to talk. After we packed the remains away for the police, he told me to come have lunch with him. We went to this little hole-in-the-wall diner called the Grotto. When he slid a coffee towards me, I started to refuse. We were on the job, and it was frowned upon to show up to a search with a caffeine buzz. He pushed it closer, saying I would want it. As I sipped at it and ate the best burger I've ever had, he told me about his early days on the team. When I was first starting out, my old partner told me that the WSRU only had 5 real rules. There's the one about not tracking when the mist swirls, and the one about not going deeper than you can see the sky. There's also the one about not entering hollows you hear tapping in if you find underground hollows. Don't emerge into them, and never try to retrieve remains from any depth below daylight. Everything else is common sense. I nodded, swallowing the burger, before asking what it was we were looking out for. Elias thought about it for a second, trying to find the best way to fill me in. The national park area has its fair share of unusual creatures, and the mountains are no different. My old partner called them shadow walkers, though their real name is something long and hard to pronounce. They once lived peacefully with the native tribes in this region, but the settlers taking over the land seems to have angered them. Now that we've hunted off a lot of the local game and wildlife, some of them supplement their diet with the occasional hiker or unsupervised camper. I mulled this over as I chewed at my burger, trying to decide if he was messing with me or not. I'd been hazed before, of course. This seemed like a classic case of messing with the new guy. I was waiting for him to break into laughter, and for him to talk about how he had gotten me, and how gullible I must be to fall for something like that. The longer it didn't happen, the more certain I became that he wasn't trying to pull a joke. So you're telling me that there are forest entities that consume flesh in the national park region? Well, no, Elias said. They aren't really spirits, not like we know them. In saying they consume flesh, would suggest that they shared any kind of relationship to us. They're forest guardians, and they have decided that we're quite palatable. I'm not telling you these things to scare you, just to make you aware. We have rules for a reason, so be aware of them, and beware of the things they're there to protect you from. I told him I would, though I certainly didn't believe in a bunch of flesh-consuming forest folk in the national park region. I wouldn't see any of them for my first 3 years, but I would see the swirling mist a few times, and when I heard the tapping while exploring hollows, I always left the area. The shadow walkers were always mindful enough to leave the bones of whoever they took, though whether that was kindness or not was open to debate. They always sent enough back for identification, usually personal items or fragments. Elias said it was just part of the job. Nothing much can be done about it, was his mantra. We can't fight them, and the couple of times I've seen someone try it, it ends up being somewhere between pointless and devastating. Even the disappearances weren't all strange. The national parks are a pretty great place to hike, camp, and take your dirt bike out for a day on the trails. They're also a great place to get intoxicated and run out of gas on your ATV, or flip your hammock over and discover you don't have the core strength you thought you had. What I've learned over the years is that there's a lot of ways someone can get swept up in the current of the wilderness and float off to unknown locations. For every weird disappearance, dozens were easily explained, though this didn't make them any less devastating for the families. The wilderness doesn't discriminate on the people it decides to take. I've pulled out marathon runners to beauty queens and everything in between. The wilderness takes them all, and if you're lucky you get a body back for a proper funeral. If you aren't, you get a handful of bones with lots of little teeth marks in them and an odd sense of dread. There are also mundane tasks to keep a ranger busy in the national parks. If it isn't missing persons, then it's lost vehicles that have gone into a ravine, or running the metal detectors for goods used in crimes. I've probably pulled about 30 firearms out of one forest, plus caches and other things that people try to hide in the mountains and surrounding valleys. The number of individuals who think it's a good idea to hide money in the woods is astounding, and they always seem confused when the police tell them that it had fallen apart when they retrieved the loot. It was nearly 4 years into the job when I finally saw one of the shadow walkers. 4 years in when we broke the rules, and it cost us dearly. We were looking for a group of campers that had gone missing. The group was from Adventure Trekkers, a company that did wilderness tours for the Whispering Peaks off the coast of Alaska. These peaks aren't for the faint of heart. 3 climbers and their guide had been swept into a ravine and were now lost. The Park Service tried to find them from the air but couldn't spot any sign of the missing climbers. Search parties had been equally unsuccessful. It was eventually decided that a team would need to follow them up the passage to retrace their steps. In the end, they hired us, and we took a small ATV up the trail they were last seen on. The passage would have been difficult to see from the air with the dense tree cover around it, and the cliffs on either side were so steep that the search teams couldn't even get close to the ravine. The climbers would have had no more luck in navigating their path than we would. We held on as we were bounced around mercilessly by the rough terrain. There was no steering or accelerating. The path was too narrow, and so we were swept along as we hunkered down and tried not to get tossed out ourselves. I saw some scuffs along the rocks and some broken plastic pieces that might have been a water bottle once, and for half a second I thought I saw a long black streak before we came jolting out into a small open clearing in the middle of the canyon. It was fed by several different game trails and continued into a dozen others that I could see. From the middle, however, the air was calm, and the ATV idled without using our gas. As we sat here, Elias decided that this was where we should look. If they came into here, then they no doubt came to rest somewhere nearby. If they fell, then we could find their gear and radio for help. If not, then we can pick a trail and press on. So we got our gear on and rolled out into the calm air of the clearing. Looking around, I immediately knew we were in for a long trek. The trees went deeper than I had ever seen, and it wasn't until you really looked that you realized how deep it was. The clearing seemed to go on forever, and the edges were lined with little eroded ledges that came up from the dark like monstrous teeth. On one of these was the ragged remains of a tent, and caught up in the debris was the body of a man. He was tangled up in one of the ropes, lying calmly in the depths. He was just about at that line, the imaginary line that we didn't cross. Rule 3. Don't go deeper than where you can see the sky. Elias seemed to weigh his options before acting, coming to a decision. He grabbed some rope and handed the end of it to me. He then gestured that he was going down to attach it. When he had it tied snugly, he wanted me to pull it back up, and he would follow with the gear. I nodded and made a circle with my thumb and forefinger as he climbed down to set it up. I watched him go, keeping a hand on the ATV for stability. It wasn't much. It was a 4-person ATV we got from the same company the climbers had gotten theirs from. He was climbing back up, ready to help me with the rope, when a bright black flash stopped him mid-climb. It was hard to see through the foliage, but I was sure there was something poking through the front of his jacket. Suddenly, he was pulled into the depths, and whatever got him seemed a hell of a lot stronger than I was. He was reeled into the depths, like a creature on a line. Before I could stop myself, I was climbing after him. I knew the rules. We never went into woods too deep to see the light, but I didn't care. I needed to save him. I needed to help Elias, and as I followed him, I could see something growing large as I followed the trail of blood. It was a labyrinth of hollows, dug straight into the side of the rock. I stopped and gawked at it for a second, in awe of how much effort something like this must have taken. I didn't think at the time that they had been made by the hands of anything, and figured they were just a strange natural occurrence. The national park region was full of weird stuff. I figured this was just some odd natural phenomenon. I didn't know the hollows, no more than I knew the basin we were tracking in. All I knew was that Elias had been dragged down, and the blood in the air was clear enough to follow his trail. As I headed lower, I took out my knife so I could mark my path. Hollow exploring 101 is always, don't explore hollows that you don't know. I knew this. That was first day stuff. So as I climbed deeper, I scratched the wall so I wouldn't get lost when I needed to escape. It was easy enough to mark the walls, and the surface was smoother than I thought could occur naturally. There was no roughage or rocks poking out. The walls were uniformly smooth. As I followed them deeper into one of the hollows, and the deeper I went, the more I heard the tapping. The tapping rule was another one I had never really had to use. The hollows we explored in were usually well-traveled, and the tapping I heard was usually just falling rocks. This was different, though. This sounded like woodpeckers, like something using echolocation to navigate. I had never heard it underground before, and it made me a little dizzy when it came too close.
I wasn't sure what it was, but I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand on edge as I climbed deeper. Suddenly, the tunnel we were in pitched upward. I followed it up, and found myself in an underground cave system, and just like that, I'd broken another one of our cardinal rules: do not emerge in hollows. As soon as my flashlight came out of the ground, that rule made a lot more sense.
The cave I was in was huge, with the ceiling hanging miles above me. Stalactites hung down like dripping teeth above my head. The flashlight I brought with me could only create tiny islands of light. Anything beyond 3 feet ahead of me was pure darkness. I turned in a circle, trying to get my bearings, and as I did, I realized I could hear a noise in the nearby dark. It was a chewing sound, something like raw meat being eaten with a toothless mouth. I spun around, trying to find the source, until my flashlight landed on 4 creatures that would haunt my dreams forever. The name Shadow Walkers made so much more sense after seeing them. Have you ever heard the original Beauty and the Beast story? The one where he's a grotesque monster, cursed to live in the shadows until he finds love. That's what these things looked like. They were gray, their skin throwing up refractions on the walls and floors. Their arms and legs looked like branches that grew out wrong. Their fingers were too long, their feet too gnarled, and their heads were the worst. They had human-like heads, but the lips and eyes were all wrong. Some of their lips were too thin. Some of them had eyes that were barely there, but they all had teeth like jagged rows of thorns. They were hunched over something, bending down to feed. In the middle of it all was Elias. His lifeless eyes stared up at the ceiling, his body broken among the rocks. I quickly scrambled back into the tunnel and began scrambling frantically back the way I had come. My whole way back, I kept hearing the tapping I had heard earlier, but now they meant something different. They were hunting me, tracking me through the tunnels. My blood ran cold even as I moved, as fast as I could out of those tunnels. I could be ensnared at any minute. The shadow walkers crawling out to corner me from any of the tunnels I had to pass by. I would be caught, just like Elias was. I would be dragged back into the darkness to join him. These tunnels were their home, their territory. I made myself slow down and look for the marks I had made on the way down, but I worried that I wouldn't have enough time to make it out. The beam from my flashlight began to flicker, the battery halfway drained. I needed to calm down, or else I'd waste my energy too soon. I was probably about a quarter of the way out when something else joined the tapping. It was a scraping noise this time, like claws on stone, and it was getting closer, much closer than the taps. I had my knife in my hand, but I don't know what good that would do against these things. I started moving faster, probably wasting more energy than I needed to. My legs were burning as I pushed myself beyond my limits. The same thoughts kept running through my head. They could get me, consume me, and I would perish beneath the ground without having ever seen the light again. When I finally saw sunlight again, I almost yelped with joy. When I rode into the ATV at long last, I cut the tethers and stripped off my pack and boots. I was looking for the keys when something hit the underside of the ATV hard enough to almost flip it over. I grabbed the keys and was soon driving for my life as I made for one of the narrow game trails on the other side of the clearing. My ATV was hit a second time, and I had to hold on for dear life as my compass slipped over the side and fell to ground. Well, I didn't really care. It was just dead weight at this point. I drove frantically, really putting that off-roading experience to good use. My ranger company found me about 5 miles upstream. I was panting and pulling myself away from the trail as fast as I could. They got me checked out and gave me a clean bill of health, but I was in no shape to track for quite a while. They found me with only about half my gear, no partner, and some pretty clear signs that I'd had a profound fright. The boss came to see me at home a week after the incident. As we sat in my living room, he asked me if I had seen them. I asked him who, not wanting to sound like a lunatic, but he gave me a look that told me he knew already. The Shadow Walkers. Elias did something to get their attention, didn't he? I nodded. I didn't really want to talk about Elias, but I felt like I had to get it out. He went too deep, I whispered, and the boss nodded. Elias probably thought it would be okay. He was always a little brash, especially when he was first starting out, But after seeing a tracking partner taken by the shadow walkers, he was careful to follow the rules. Was it your first time seeing them? I nodded, and he patted my shoulder in a knowing way. It's always difficult after the first time. If you want to quit, I understand, but I wish you wouldn't. You're a great tracker. Maybe even better than Elias. I need someone like you on my team. Think about it, and get back to me. It took some time. A long while, I suppose, but I did eventually get back into the wilderness, and over time, I began to feel comfortable with doing tracking missions again. Even so, I was careful to follow the rules after that, and I always make sure the new guys understood how important they were. We don't track where the mist circles. We don't go into hollows when we hear the tapping. We don't emerge in underground hollows we are unfamiliar with, and above all, we never, ever go so deep that the sun can't touch us. I know what lies beneath the surface now. I just hope no one else has to.